Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Lee of the Hollywood Sound Museum, and I'm here with my two good friends, Charles Maynes. Say hello, Charles.
Hi.
And Eric Potter. Say hi, Eric.
Ahoy. Hello,
Ahoy,
everyone.
ahoy, ahoy. Did you know that was what was suggested as to answer phones in the very beginning? I think Edison.
Oh, and when phones were invented, this is like,
Yeah, Thomas
ahoy.
Edison suggested that a good way to answer the phone would be ahoy, ahoy, or something like that. Anyway, there's some obscure.
Let's bring that back.
Obscure trivia. Well, Mr. Burns on The Simpsons says it just for that reason.
Wow.
He always answers the phone ahoy.
Yeah.
He's a big Edison fan.
We went from phone history to Simpsons trivia, just like that, boys and girls.
Well, telephones are amazing. Telephones were my early introduction to sound, really. I was fascinated with the bell system and the phone hardware.
That's right. I remember you telling me that. You recorded a whole library of that, didn't you?
I did on a cassette, on an early micro cassette, which unfortunately was lost, still lost. I think it may exist somewhere, but it has yet to be found. But I have these sounds of, 1960s and 70s.
Oh, wow.
New Jersey Bell phone system, dial tones, busy signals, connection sounds. Boy,
that's
yeah.
Neat. Chuck, do you remember your first sound effects recordings that you did? Not necessarily professional or just playing around.
Well, probably music. I mean, I think I was, because my dad brought back a Kai reel-to-reel when he was in Vietnam. And
I think you told me that, yeah.
So yeah, it's like, just jacking around with that. And, going into junior high school and high school and, doing bands and using it to record stuff. I really got into it with digital sampling keyboards in around 1983. And that's when I started using like the PCM F1 and actually most of the time we'd take analog recorders or the very earliest stats out to record stuff and then move them back so we could load them in a sampler and make musical sounds with them.
Oh wow, that's neat.
So yeah.
But you don't have any like early memories of taking the cassette recorder out and recording stuff?
I mean, I'm sure that I did, but it was not like I was going after trying to make new sounds as opposed to documenting stuff that was happening.
Okay.
Because it's like, I have a degree in broadcast journalism, and it's like that kind of was a part of that journey as well, where it's like, doing, like stuff to tape, it's like you're doing a lot of radio production, you get into that realm, it's like I went from, finishing high school, going to college, getting an internship at a recording studio, recording bands at the recording studio while playing in bands as well. And then, basically getting into videotape production. Again, that was like, 1983, 84. And then, doing my first film, I think, in maybe 1985. So, ending up where I ended up, I don't know that I would have forecast that.
Right.
Really. It was like, I think I started recording sound effects when I was working at Digidesign, actually, where I almost got killed for the first time by almost getting hit by a Caltrain, which was quite an experience.
Oh, well, save that for, we're going to do a podcast specifically about those kinds of adventures. So save that story. That's a good one. But both of you, let me ask you both this. Starting out to record sound effects professionally for specific projects, Eric has talked plenty about his first experience with the remake of Lawrence of Arabia. We talked about that not too long ago. But Chuck, do you remember the first time you had like a laundry list of something to record for a film and how you approached it? I mean, did you have any guidance or did you go with anyone or? Do you remember?
Well, I mean, the first film we did, or the first film I worked on, was an amazing blockbuster called Return of the Killer Tomatoes.
That's right. We've discussed that.
Yeah, which was really fun. And we had to record actually a lot of sounds for that,
Uh-huh.
but we were doing it to Nagras and stuff, and
Mhm.
then basically loading that into emulators and manipulating it.
But were you on your own, or did you go with a crew or the supervisor?
Well, for that stuff, I was working with Martin Lopez, who was the sound supervisor and basic sound editor on the show. We were both in San Diego.
Okay.
Now we both live in LA. He's done feature film sound for since '85 at least. And he's now working at Universal doing like a special venue stuff.
Oh, neat.
So it's like that was the first experience, and it's like for me, unlike I'm assuming unlike Eric, I did not get paid so much to go out and record until relatively a little deeper into my career.
Uh-huh.
It was a matter of like, oh, you're doing this editorial, so you're gonna just need to record some sounds for what you don't need. And it's
Right.
like, oh, okay. It's like then you do the sounds and you put them into the cut, and if they work, they work, and if they don't, you revisit it. I don't think it was until oh god, I honestly I don't think I had actually gotten paid specifically to go out and record sound effects
Mhm.
until um, probably when I was working on the Alamo in the 2000s.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, I'd done a huge amount of recording. I mean, I'd
Sure.
probably at least 100 hours of stuff I had recorded up to that point. But it was always like when I did my first gun shoot with Steve Flick and Richard for the Jackal and Starship Troopers. It
Mhm.
was like I didn't know anything about anything, and it was like you just go out and you do it, and it's like try to figure it out as you go along.
That's what I want to talk about. Because a lot of people starting out on their own, and now we're in an age now where people can pick up the Zoom recorder, like I've said
Hmm.
many times before, and to start doing it, which
Sure.
I hardly recommend for people who want to start this business and build their library. And there's a certain amount of instinctive stuff that you realize you need to do, like the pauses between events and things like that sort of thing. I mean, does that kind of, I want to get a response from both of you, the logic of that. You are recording something that will eventually be librarized. I mean, Charles, it's a little different with what you were describing about it going straight into a sampler to be used. You can be a
Right.
little more forgiving about spaces and things like that. You can sort of make something that you need for what you're doing, but something that's going to exist in a library or going to be handed off to an editor who's going to
Sure.
make sense of this. Some of the things that you pick up on the job and just sort of instinctively realize need to be considered when you're doing this sort of thing.
Well, I mean, for me, it was always and this is, an ongoing thing, and I'm sure Eric's encountered it as well, where, the biggest problem I've always seen was you go out and record something and you immediately just grab the thing you need and cut it. And then, like, you put the tape on the shelf for later because you've already got all sorts of stuff you need to have done today.
Mhm.
Whereas, like if I'm doing, recording for hire, it's like a lot of times I'll turn over, edited masters. So it's like, I'll have, 24 channels of material that I'll go in hand sync, in a Pro Tools session, and then, make sure it all lines up so they can like drag the whole batch into some place and group it and then just take the little pieces that they want and they can carry on. I mean, historically speaking, we all know about the various sound recordings where you would have um, a great sound effect and then somebody speaks over the end of it. I will not go any further than that.
We can talk about that later.
uh,
But yes, I understand.
yeah, but I mean, it's like when you're doing when you're doing it for hire, it's like you're very aware of those things. It's like
Yeah.
you're actually. I mean, I think that there's this great uh, push pull of knowing when to start and when to stop the tape, because sometimes you just want to let the tape run a little longer because something interesting might happen. But the scariest thing is when the tape doesn't run when you want it to be running. And it's like, depending on the event, it's like that could have heavier implications than,
Mhm.
other times.
Sure, sure. Eric, do you want to relate your wisdom on this?
Well, I love that idea, the passion of your first recordings. Like when I went after all those phone sounds, I was just fascinated with the bell system and all the different little sounds, and I was trying to learn how it worked by listening to how the workings sounded, relays, everything that everyone with a telephone would hear when they operate the telephone, all these connection sounds. The busy signal of one town, like where my grandmother lived, sounded completely different from the busy signal in our town.
Oh, fascinating.
And yeah, and such was there were a bunch of smaller bell companies, all over the U.S. So I
Sure.
was fascinated by that, and that was the passion. And a lot of us in this session today are just really excited to capture things that we think are really cool, and then of course that's the primary drive. And then I think it's really good to just in your early recordings experiences, just do that, just do it, make mistakes, have fun, but just go after your ideas and pursue them, and then listen back critically. Yeah, if this is not a work for hire, um, just throw yourself into it and change up what you're doing, and experiment, with mic positions or a type of microphone,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you're willing to and have time to play around with. And then when you get back and you can listen critically, um, having developed that passion and that sort of bold willingness to just go in, I'm going to ask the guys out of the fire department if they'll run the siren for me. It takes a
Sure.
certain amount of pure chutzpah and guts sometimes to do some of these things. And I think it's good to get good at that,
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
sort of strive and ask for things, and then once you've done that a number of times, you've got a certain confidence. And sure enough, when it comes time to do a session, Charles mentioned like a gun session, and you're working with a real armorer who has no tolerance for people screwing around in the environment. It's so much about safety,
Mm-hmm.
then so many other circumstances that need to be logically thought out. And that's kind of the other phase. When you're doing it in a professional way, there's so much to think about with safety and arranging your list of things you need logically so that you're being efficient with time. A lot of times you're working with somebody who really knows, this is the guy who has an elephant. He's giving me his
Mm-hmm.
time. And how often do you find a guy with an elephant?
Exactly.
Not very
You
often.
don't want to, yeah, you don't want to waste their time. You want
Yeah.
to be they're your ally, and you want to be their ally. And that's some of the skills that come along a little bit later, but when they take a lot of mental energy. So
Oh,
when
yeah.
you get to the gig and the location, the thing that's happening, your brain is furiously working, sorting out what's the most logical, efficient way to go about doing this. And
Sure.
it takes that energy. But then if you have this background of just passionately going in and getting the sounds you love, once everything fits into place and you've done that preliminary work and you get started, and when you go in, you sort of have this momentum about, all right, now I'm just going to enjoy the sound. Now
Yeah.
I'm just going to listen, and if if I don't love it, I'm just going to wait till the phrasing of this moment is finished, and then I'm going to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Sure.
so you have this sort of analytical, critical mind, um, but at the same time, if you've developed this natural passion and enjoyment for capturing sounds, you can always fall back on that, even if 7 out of 10 of your planned incidents for a session go horribly wrong. And you can only do this and that and instead. And well, at least you can enjoy the sound, and if you enjoy the sound, you really can make the most out of it in that moment. So,
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. No, that's great. That's marvelous. Um, and it's also, yeah, it's very important to, yeah, prioritize the things that you need, and then if you have time and if you're polite and patient with whoever you're working with, hey, let's try something neat, or hey, what else does this thing do? You know, you get into that wonderful extra
yeah,
stuff, which sometimes becomes something very important for whatever you're working on. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
yes, certainly. If you're working with the specialists like Charles was with the armor and the guns, you know, it's you very often, yeah. What do you think would be interesting here? Or
Yeah,
like, what
exactly.
is there another way? Um, Gosh, it sure overloads the mic when that gun goes off. Is there a way? What can we do? You know, and we've come to learn. Finally, one of the armorers was like, well, if I point this way over to that hill, and then move in this direction, you'll get different,
Mhm.
degrees of sound. It's so funny. I must have done 4 gun sessions before that even came up. And it
Mhm.
was the armorer's idea.
Right.
uh, I was so busy trying to make the things work,
Mhm.
and he had the most creative and interesting solution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I've had a number of sessions like that where the clients sometimes they're trying to, it's like with a car or anything else, it's like they want an accurate representation of a sound.
Sure.
So they have a charger in the car, so they want a charger. It's like they want it to be the same car. um, but in a number of instances, on some gun sessions I've done, the brief was all of our all of our things that we're going to use these sounds for are imaginary. So we want to make interesting sounds for them. So let's find stuff that sounds interesting.
Sure.
And that's when really you go to your armor and or armorers and say, hey, what do you have that makes really unique and unusual sounds that we can use? And
Mhm.
I know one thing, really expanding that, because I think as Eric mentioned, your people skills are, I would say, 200% more important than your technical skills.
Mhm.
Because if you're a great recordist but you can't work with people, then nobody's going to
Mhm.
want to hire you.
Sure.
But I mean, I found that especially with the game people and international folks, I'm having to be essentially the the session producer.
Sure.
Where I have to get film permits, insurance, essentially contract the armor. I mean, I did a recording with Pole Position where we recorded 2 airplanes with planes of fame out in San Bernardino. So we had to like rent a San Bernardino airport,
Oh,
which
wow.
had its own insurance. Planes of
Mhm.
Fame had their own deal. And basically getting all of the and film permits were required because it was the county of San Bernardino that was involved. So it wasn't like you could just say, oh yeah, we're just making noises. It's like, oh yeah, you need a film permit for that. So now you have to go through that process, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting. It's like, so I would say on any location work I've done, um, with the exception of SEAL team, because we've got a full package, deal, which I just basically say I need to do this, and they say, when do you want to do it?
Mhm.
Um, but for most of these other things, it's like 90% of your time is spent in preparation and paperwork and getting the shoot calendar,
Sure. Sure.
and then you spend the 10% of time out on a location rolling sound.
Doing the stuff. Yeah. You brought up something very interesting, and it reminded me of some situations. I can't think of specifics, maybe, but maybe you can. Where sometimes we're after a sound that whatever it is doesn't necessarily really make, and we have to like delicately ask the people that, hey, can you make it do this? No, it doesn't really do that. Yeah, well, can you give me something that, you have to be very creative in the way that you delicately ask these people to give you a performance almost of something that you're going to turn it into this other thing, this fanciful thing that the movie needs.
Sure.
But it may not necessarily. That's where your people skills really come into play too. Sometimes if you're, you don't want to offend them.
Well, I mean, I did a recording session for some lowrider stuff that we needed to do the bouncy car thing, and I was amazed. It's like that. Some of the best material I got was from contact mics in the trunk of the car, where the servos were that essentially drove those hydraulics, and it was something I never would have thought of in advance. It was more like okay, show me the car. Do the thing. It's like, oh yeah, this looks like it could be good. Well, it's like, when you're miking up a car for anything, it's like, you try to find, good acoustic resonant chambers that you can mic because that's going to amplify the interesting sound that the car is making.
Right.
In my experience.
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Eric, please.
Just that's a bit of brilliance there that I'd like to expound upon. Resonant chambers and such. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we can all point microphones at things, but if we can get a sound to happen within a resonant space, that or in Charles' case, the trunk floor as a resonator in itself of that vehicle really brings things to a certain kind of life.
Oh, sure.
And
well,
I always think of it.
You talked about this in your very first session that we've talked about a few times now, about the boot stomp in the hallway. It's a perfect resonant.
Yeah.
The reverberance of that was just exactly what the film needs. So you're thinking in those terms.
If you don't have the other aspect of that being kind of ambient, the other one being more directly effecty, like Charles's hydraulics, the fact that it was mounted, you can put devices on things. That's what I like. So you're gonna record this little motor, but man, I need it to sound heavier. It's not, or I need to record this super heavy, huge sounding motor that doesn't exist. And one of the most fun ways to go about is if you find some kind of motor that you like the basic sound of, you can start putting it on objects. You can put it on boxes, you can put it on drums, you can put it on sheet metal, you can put start thinking about a musical instrument, how a guitar body resonates, or a drum. You hit a drum head and the shell and the hoops and everything, it all, we make whole, instruments out of these physical materials, the drums, so that, sure, these drums produce a sound of their own, but what happens when you put a little motor on top of that drum? Other things that resonate, that's really creative thing to do with a basic idea.
Sure. Well, this immediately reminds me to the great story you told me about Mystery Men and how you were sort of worldizing some of the synth sounds that come straight out of an output. They have no physical resonance to them, and you're creating that by re-recording them in different environments or in a metal box. Yeah.
No, I mean, it was kind of interesting on Evil Dead. I used synth sounds through a Moog ring modulation pedal that I was able to perform for like the accelerating evil spirit, and I was amazed. It's like the expression that I think that the main thing is that you don't have a static sound. It's like you want the sound to evolve, from start to finish. In almost every case, I mean, even with things like backgrounds, it's like it's nice to have some motion in them on a timeline, where it's like they just aren't, it's just not like white noise. So I mean, it is really interesting. I mean, I found, I got this one guitar effect recently, and it was like really interesting because it was like it's called this Boss multi overtone pedal. and I've been getting these really arcane boss pedals lately. That and their acoustic simulator and their Terra Echo are three recent ones. And I found that like with, if I ran my Jazzmaster through that pedal and used an EBO, it made the most incredible sounding AC, like, power line sound.
Oh,
It's
wow.
just like, it was like, this is insane. This sounds like a giant power plant. It's like I don't have to do anything. I just hold the EBO on it, and I can just sit here for as long as I want to sit, and it's going to just keep making this ever-changing, constantly evolving sound. But it's like you don't always have the opportunity to have those kind of measures of experimentation.
Sure.
I mean, it's like I have a water phone, so it's like I get to do all sorts of crazy stuff with that. One of the best sounds I think I ever got from it was attaching a contact mic to it underneath and then putting it out so rain hit it. So it was like this really interesting metal rain sound, but it was like super clean because it was, basically being contact mic directly. So there was no acoustic that was happening outside of what was happening inside of its actual acoustic chamber. So it's like all the outside, like all of the natural sound and all the trees moving and all that crap, it didn't hear it.
That's fascinating.
It just totally disregarded it.
I love that. I love
So
that.
yeah, I mean, there's all these really interesting tricks, and the mics too. I mean, it's like the mic performance you get from using shotgun mics sometimes.
Oh, sure, moving things around and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've got. I mean, I was on one of the production sound groups, and somebody was talking about how like they used a long shotgun and were doing it like near a lakeside, and they said, "Oh, it's really weird because it sounds very flangey." And I was thinking, wow, it's like, I have long shotguns. I've used them a fair amount. I've never heard flanging come off of them.
That's odd, yeah.
But it's like, it's, very directional. So, I mean, they might have been hitting some weird acoustic,
sure,
contour in where the mic was picking up that was introducing this modulation effect, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would think certainly relative if there was another mic going as well, for sure, with reflections coming off a long waterscape, could be a fascinating source of little permutations. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh sure, absolutely. And if you have the time to play and experiment, sometimes we don't, which is unfortunate.
It's so weird. I mean, again, when you're doing the work for hire, it's always tough because you're usually not being hired to experiment. Like in an open-ended manner. It's like, oh yeah, you can take 15 minutes to get a sound.
Sure.
But for the most part, it's all about getting the sound and getting it back to the studio so that they can, they can use the sound.
Sure.
It's kind of like it's like being a session musician, which I never really pursued because musically I love to experiment, probably more than anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably more than learning an exact part and playing it, although I enjoy doing that too. But the few like gun for hire sessions as a guitar player I've done, I realized, oh, they expect me to play this part perfectly right off the bat. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Here's the track, listen to it once, put down this part, and we're listening and we expect it to be really good.
Right.
And that's kind of how in the sound effects world, like in that music session, I was like, oh wait, well, if I can just wait, let me get this pedal, and I think I might, that's also out the window in these music sessions, and unfortunately, like you're hired by a studio or a corporation or a car manufacturer or something, there's there isn't that much time to play around unless you really start getting good solid results right off the bat and there's time at the end of the day, but yeah, you better be quick about rigging up that car because they might take
Oh,
it
yeah.
away from you any moment for some other reason.
Oh,
Well,
sure.
and I mean, especially, with any of, any of these subjects, it's like you really, it's like we go into the session thinking that we've got, this device, whatever it might be, for the duration of how long we need it. It's like we don't really take into account, well, it could break,
Yeah.
or in one
Is there a
case,
backup?
we could crash it into a hangar. It's like, okay, well, that's going to probably stop that session.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's like,
Now what?
yeah, now what? It's like we still need the car, but we don't have the car anymore. So,
And you're usually in a remote location, and there's not
oh
much
yeah,
you can do.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, doing anything with the military. It's like they're not there for you.
No.
They're not
It's
on
like,
your schedule. Huh?
yeah, it's like, you can't. It's like we're doing this stuff at these points in the day, and just stay the fuck out of our way. Excuse me for swearing.
No, it's
Just
all right.
stay out of the way,
Yeah.
because it's
Because
like,
they can't swear. They can't swear, so you can swear for them, Charles.
yeah. Well, actually, they're very good at swearing.
Yes, they are.
They're
yes.
quite well skilled.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, I mean, you don't get to govern, or you don't get to control that, that timeline when you're with them.
Right.
It's like, I mean, I remember doing a thing out at Yuma with the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, oh yeah, we got, F-35s we're going to record. And it's like, okay, well, you can be this close. And it's like, this close was like 100 yards away.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, well, I don't know that this was
Bummer.
really what we were hoping to get after driving to Arizona for this recording opportunity. But it is what we got. I mean, we got to, record the amphibious tractors, down at Camp Pendleton. They were actually, we were able to put a machine on the thing. Like usually the thing with, basically all the military is, you can generally put a machine in the vehicle that you're recording, but you can't go on it. Like if you're flying on an aircraft or something, or a helicopter, you don't get to go for a ride. It's like, you can give, the crew chief or, one of the extra people there a mic and say, can you just, try to hold it so that it makes some sense.
Yeah.
Be wired up, you fix it to something, but then, that can have its own impacts. I mean, it's funny because I think, for especially, Eric and John, especially, people have an idea that like they get to have an immense amount of control over, these kind of very exotic session situations.
Yeah.
And you improvise well. I mean, that's why you get those sessions. It's like, and that goes again back to the people thing. It's like, if you can present yourself in a manner that everybody is happy with and everybody doesn't get frustrated, then you're going to go a lot further than being an ace recordist who is just a flaming butthole.
Honestly, I can't think of very many.
It's
Well, I
I
can.
think.
I can definitely
I
think
think-
of some.
I guess I'm lucky. I've worked with, you guys have been great. Fasal, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
John Fasal.
There's the occasional prima donna. It's kind of. I think it's a little more rare in our corner.
Yeah.
Thankfully, and it's one reason why I really love our corner of the business is, we're not quite rock stars. I mean, we do some pretty amazing things sometimes.
Yeah.
But we're sound. We are kind of still second banana by nature in the entertainment experience. We're not camera, we're not light, we're sound, and so by nature of that, a lot of us have learned to subvert our ego, when around each other, and we're all a little, we're all, we don't feel like we're rock stars so much,
Yeah.
even though sometimes we are. And I
Well,
think
I
that
mean-
really helps. It really helps us all produce.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
I think anybody who's been doing it for more than 10 years, really honestly qualifies for that realm. I mean, it's hard to make it in the film business, or any aspect of the sound business, whether it's music recording, film, video games, whatever. It's a hard gig. It's like,
Yeah.
you have to have both the passion and the skills and, the desire and the kind of, well, I would call it, hopeless romantic spirit of like, what else am I going to do in this world? Because, this is what this is what I'm into. And it's like, I don't really care about accounting, or law, or, all the other important things that people do. I mean, we are, we're like crazy guitar players. It's like we do guitar, and we love it. It's like we hear things in the guitar that nobody else will ever hear.
Absolutely. One thing I would like to talk about, and something that is very important to me, but in the digital age kind of gets, it doesn't get much consideration because of metadata and all the different ways of documenting our effects, but the importance of good slates. I have, as a librarian, come across so many recordings that I have no clue what they are because nobody said anything in the actual recording.
Right.
I want to get from both of you guys your wisdom of the importance, or maybe it's not in some cases. I don't know. I think it always is, but the theory behind slates from both of you.
Eric?
Yeah, why don't you start, Eric?
Okay. Well, in a perfect world, we know what's going to happen, and a lot of times we do, and so we will take that time right up front. Certainly when I'm doing a multi-track session, like recording a vehicle, and I've got anywhere from 8 to 16 channels potentially on that vehicle, 3 engine mics, 2 exhaust mics, a stereo, or maybe 5.0 interior. All that I like to slate up front, right after setting up the mics, because I do have that much control. I know that is all laid out, and having that like right up front, I think is really helpful to the librarian. Hopefully there is a librarian, or whoever receives the material.
Sure.
That sort of stuff is really crucial, because in the multi-tracks, you're getting all kinds of signals, and some of them probably sound quite strange and unidentifiable.
Mhm.
And that, so that's certainly essentially to be brought up front on. And I do it on the first track before we even turn the car on or try to record the effect. I explain all that, what microphone is this, what channel is it on?
Oh yeah.
And then I like to give a little background. Where are we? What are we hoping to capture? And then when you're getting into actually recording the sound, it's also very nice if you can pre-announce, like, this car is going to come in slow and come to a stop right in front of me. Usually you can arrange to have that worked out in advance. Sometimes the sound comes on and it's beautiful, and you're not going to step on it with your voice. So I'm fine with slating after the fact, tail slating, what happened, what was unique about the situation, and anything changed. Oh, channel number 4, it sounded like the mic dropped out for some reason. Any little technical flaws and things like that. So I always find that there's almost always time, if you can't get everything up front, there's almost always time at the end of a take, or at least a minute or 2 later from the incident, to explain everything that happened. And I've been, see, as Charles yawns here, I've been accused.
That wasn't in regards to anything you were saying.
It's okay.
Well, as happenstance would have it, I think people can find me to be a little long-winded on some of the slates, because maybe I do like the sound of my own voice, and I have fun with it. But I really, and I also, Charles, you mentioned broadcast journalism. I have a radio tradition as well. And I loved being on the radio and saying things and describing a record or interviewing someone. Or so, if anything, I might be accused of saying too much, but I think I say it at the right time and not without ruining anything. But it really is helpful to convey as much as you can in words, and if you have to do it at the end of the take, that's fine. If you have to do it at the end of the session, that is fine. Sometimes I warn librarians or effects wranglers, editors, like there's a lot of slating at the end that explains what happened, and so be sure to go down there maybe first.
Oh, sure.
Because it is a linear process. We can't really, and a lot of times we don't have time to make
to write
logs,
it down. Yeah, you just talk it, just say it.
Yeah.
I remember as a librarian, and especially when we were working on quarter-inch tape, to save those really the head slates where you talk about everything that's going to happen in the session, or the tail slate where you basically any notes that I remember saving them either after the tones at the head of the tape, or making a special cue, a specific slate cue that has all of this. I always tried to save it, and I was quite perturbed when we started doing our first digital, transfers of everything, and concerned about drive space cutting off all these slates. It really,
well, I mean,
it irked me a little, but I understood. But still, anyway, Charles.
I mean, I'm kind of a little different in practice than Eric's process.
Yeah,
it's like I take copious written notes when I'm recording. So it's like once I'm recording, I'll be checking levels across various channels, but then I'll be notating on paper what each take is. So
but that's good too.
Just do it. And one thing I really work hard at doing is making sure that whenever I'm going out on a new session, all of the recorders are totally clean as far as their drives go. So it's like, I don't have anything other than the stuff that I recorded in that day on any of the media that I bring back. So I don't have to worry about, other stuff. It's like, oh yeah, did I go back to the right? Because it's like the one place where, I think is most challenging is going and reviewing after a take material, because, it's just not, it's not as easy as it could be, I don't think.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
Especially in the sound devices machines. And it's like we're, seeing all sorts of, obviously the 32-bit thing is new, it's like there's a whole lot of change happening.
Right.
Which is, I think it remains to be seen how that's going to really affect, people like Eric and I. I mean, I'm not gonna speak for a lot of the newer recordists who are younger, because it's like I think that they have a very, very different, way that they came up through learning how to do audio. It's like I actually see. I was thinking about this yesterday. Like 24-bit linear recording, I think is going to essentially be what Nagra recording was 5 years ago. Where we're recording to digital high sample rate digital, but sometimes you want to take out a Nagra, and it's like the Nagra is not going to have the frequency response, it's not going to have the dynamic range, it's going to have a sound though. It's like I mean, I equate a lot of stuff with music. If recording music on analog 24 track sounds very different from doing it on digital, even if it's an intermediate. So like you could record on the 24 track, then bring it into digital and do your editing and stuff, and you still have the kind of sonic qualities that the analog tape imparts.
Right.
Especially on transients and stuff.
Do they still put ADD or DDD on? We don't have CDs as often. They're not commercially out there.
I don't think they do that anymore. I haven't seen that. That was definitely a thing.
I was starting to ask the question, and then I realized CDs aren't really a thing anymore.
Well, you can.
Well, you can still
CDs
get them.
are. Yeah, I just bought a CD on Sunday. Saw a band, and I bought an LP and a CD from them. And a lot of CDs that today, I guess, are more independently made.
Sure.
But I don't know if you wanted to, you could probably still get a lot of stuff on it, but I've noticed that badge has gone away. I haven't seen
Yeah.
it in years and
Yeah.
years. The
I was
ADD,
thinking about that.
AAD,
Yeah.
DDD, maybe assume that any new release is fully digital, but
Pretty much.
and then our techniques now, even if we record a drum set or a live studio session to 24 track analog and then move it to Pro Tools and finish, which is still a great way some of the best people are working. I don't know if that qualifies as, I mean, technically it qualifies as ADD, I guess, but
Sure.
it doesn't quite line up to the original intent of that badge. I
Right,
think.
right.
Well, I mean, it's like mentioning vinyl. You look at the vinyl resurgence, and it's like vinyl is probably, in a technical manner, one of the least attractive playback formats you could ever hope for, especially
It's
something like a 45.
Yeah.
kind of
know,
archaic,
It
Yeah, I
really
mean,
is.
it's like you've got, just the cutting wave issues. It's like it really, restricts you as far as how much bass can be on the track.
Yeah.
You have high frequency
Highly
limitations.
compromised. You have to go way out of your way to apply these EQ curves and stuff to make it
Mhm.
work.
Right.
But somehow,
But somehow it does. It's like
Yeah.
you listen to it, and it's like the Nagra. The Sheps Nagra combination, which I think is,
yeah,
it's just a very, very sonically pleasing timbre. Whatever you record with it is going to sound really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that again, with the technology, going back to that DDD thing, it's like that was kind of created as a marketing ploy.
Yeah. Yeah.
To try to convince people that, like, oh yeah, well, if it's digital on the way in, then it's going to be superior in sound quality on the way out.
Right.
Whereas, we know that really isn't necessarily the truth at this point, especially, listening to like the remaster work Steven Wilson has done, where he's gone and done the King Crimson catalog and Jethro Tull, and his whole idea was like, I want to treat this as though I'm doing a fine art restoration.
Sure.
It's like I don't want it to sound different from what people know this to sound like,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I want to
yeah.
just try to take each track and make it clearer to sound, clearer in sound, and hopefully remove some of the defects along the lines that would be very minor, but when they all stack up, you can hear a bit of a difference.
Right. Right. Gentlemen, thank you. This has been great. And everyone out there, please seek out our podcasts with these two gentlemen, because we're going to be talking more about some of the adventures we had out in the world of location sound recording. So that'll be a fun conversation. Guys, thank you so much.
Here, a pleasure.
Everybody out there, keep listening, and we'll see you at the next one.